right, we are here. It's Friday. It's the last word presented by Crispin Commentary. Courtney, Christy, hello.
That was awesome. That was like magic, Christy.
Was that not?
It was perfect.
It was perfect.
So a little Sunday night football. That was like Chris Collingsworth. I think at the beginning of Sunday night football, he like slides into the screen right when they're coming on live. So that was a good little Chris Collingsworth move there, Christy.
That was literally running from the other side of the building to get over here. I'm like, oh, okay. Made it.
All steps are good.
We are here, and we'll see if KP shows up. I think he was battling some stuff this week, some yucks. So we'll carry on without him or until he arrives. But we made it to another Friday. The world has not collapsed completely. But yet there's still lots of stuff out there. Where do you guys want to start this week?
That painful loss of the Pistons last night.
Yeah.
Oh man, it was like they're so close yet so far. I have something. I have something to start the whole thing.
Okay.
We were talking a little bit in our pre-emails, right, about housing prices are here and we anticipate that interest rates are going to come down a little bit, and this whole economy thing has a part of it, and the whole tariff thing has a part of it. I'm asking this question to my learned finance fellows on the other side of this. I'm just, a lady in ops land asking questions. And I've participated in a lot of conversations in our nation's capital in the last 2 weeks, one yesterday. And some of the problems that we seem to have in this space, no matter what they are, whether they're insurance driven, right? Whether they are affordability driven. So interest rates are a national standard, right? Underwriting requirements tend to be a federal standard if you consider that most mortgages are owned in some part by some sort of federal entity, right? But some of the actual issues that we have that can actually solve some of the problems that we have are really neighborhood dependent in some instances, but they're local issues. So it's more to insure properties in California, in Texas, in Louisiana, in Florida, by way of example. We're learning more in the insurance space that if you use special materials or, if you build the houses, to modern standards, you can adjust the risk of that policy, but it's only at the house level.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, in this world where it feels like we're even going to be regulated less at the federal level, right? There's going to be more regulation at the state level. Here's my question. Is the insurance problem really a state problem? And should there be more energy and regulation there? I understand that I'm calling for more state level regulation of something, and KP is joining the chat at the same time. And so
he didn't hear you. He's not gonna.
I keep going into rooms. We keep saying we don't know what we need to do about tariffs. The insurance problem's so big and the whole world's falling down. We haven't seen the hope that we were seeking in 2024 with regard to interest rates, coming down to a more reasonable place. But I'm not hearing anybody talk about solutions. Have you guys heard any good solutions in any of these pockets? And are the solutions really at the local level?
So I'll share something that when you think about the local level, I think there's got to be a bridge between the local and the federal. And as an example, here in Austin, there was some great work done around accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
And right, getting them added and all the things, right? And this great work was done. And you know how many have been built? I think like 0, maybe 3. It didn't have the impact that they wanted. And for a variety of reasons. But when you think about whatever you do at the local level, it has to work with the rules that are at the national level. So, if I were to design a brand new type of house, and I put all this work and energy to it, and I'm like, this is going to solve affordable housing problems. Yet that type of property is not eligible for any type of Fannie, Freddie, or Ginnie financing. I'm going to fail because I don't have access to capital. Or if that property can't be insured because I built it with these space age materials that Elon Musk brought back from the moon or whatever, then and I can't get it insured, it's not going to work. And so when people operate in silos, I think that creates the reason that you're feeling like there aren't any solutions, is that they aren't all encompassing. And so by the time you see a solution, it's like, well, yeah, that's not going to work because of X, Y, and Z. And so how do we get all the stakeholders in the same room that have the knowledge of how the things work to start to brainstorm ideas for solutions?
I love that.
A lot
So,
there.
well, yeah, I know, but from a servicing perspective, I've always said, let's have a national foreclosure standard. Why? Because we have to do something different in all of the pockets. Even Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, let me try it again. Fannie, Freddie, VA, USDA, and HUD all have different standards and different waterfalls that servicers have to deploy. And we are curious about why there's not good loss mitigation technology, or maybe we're not curious about that anymore because the tech can't keep up with the rule changes of those 5 entities alone, let alone states, right? And
Right.
so I don't know. I agree that all the stakeholders need to get into a room, but what is better regulated where? And how do we look at this? Because at the end of the day, I think lenders are all just competing to make the next loan, right? And that's actually as local as it gets. That's an individual human story, right?
Well, those individual human stories matter because what they go through, because to your point, there are the regulations and the rules that we have to follow. But then you put a human in the mix, I mean, that's going to throw a whole bunch of kinks into there with how do we fit their work, their lifestyle, their family, their budget constraints, their income. Like, there are so many individual pieces that come in. I mean, what about their dang goldfish? Like, these are all the things that we have to think about, and that human story matters.
The goldfish needs an ADU, Christy.
And-
That's the answer for Austin. Everyone in Austin, you make an ADU for your goldfish. Go, KP.
I'll just say I was on 4 minutes before start time, but apparently there was a new link today. So thank you
There
for
was-
texting.
Let's blame the producer.
No,
Oh,
no,
wait a minute. No, it's me. Wait a minute.
no. Well, I will say this: it's a blessing and a curse, right? So I was having this discussion the other day, Tuesday night, with a gentleman, 2 gentlemen from Albania, from Easy Home Loans, great correspondent of ours, and then A1 AMC, one of our AMCs. We do like this Mediterranean deal, like out of Glendora, Garden of Eden Cafe, great food, been there a few times, smoked cigars and hookah and all this stuff. And then I was deathly ill all day Wednesday, but we won't get into the fact that your boy here lost like 2 pounds throwing up Wednesday. But I feel better now. Haven't eaten anything today. It's 10 o'clock. Part of that discussion, one of the reasons why we don't have a war in Yugoslavia anymore is because they kind of took this same approach that the United States takes. It's like this loose republic of states, right? People in Albania are different than Serbia or where the case would be, Croatia. Just like every state is different here, the way they manage ADUs. California, for as horrendous as it is to do business here, they're really good about ADUs because they feel like it's a way to champion home affordability. But when it comes to foreclosures, Massachusetts or New York or Illinois, it's like, oh, the borrower didn't make their payment. Let's give them 3 years to figure out why. In Texas, it's like you go see a judge and they're like, you didn't make your payment, you're out. 90 days, you're foreclosed on. Have a nice day. So every state kind of operates differently for different, objections. And this loose republic that we have in the United States is difficult. It is to navigate through. It allows us to be, 50 nations in one. And there are different philosophies on housing. And it sucks, but it's job security for you, Courtney, because, you set up a waterfall to navigate through all that stuff. The next big servicer, it's harder for them to come through. So then when you have a servicer that does a really good job, like a Mr. Cooper, you have a bigger servicer go by them, like Rocket. And so 1 in 6 loans now are under one umbrella. So, it's tough. Regulation's tough and it's different. And it's a double-edged sword that cuts both ways. I wish, I used to go to this really great think tank called the Housing Renaissance. They used to do it down at the lodge at Torrey Pines, which was super cool if you're into the spa or golf or whatever for, whoever's out there. And we would have this discussion. Like, we'd have all these think tanks and bottom line is like, when it comes to housing policy, so much is done at a local level. Permitting is done at a local level. The red tape is done at a local level. And, trying to get the $100,000 it costs even to open a door anywhere. I know because I've got, 3 construction projects going. It's a lot of money, and it does hurt home, building, affordability, workouts, foreclosures, all that stuff. And but again, it's like, do you want one big federal regulator telling everyone how to do things? They're not going to get it right with 50 different voices in the room, plus all the counties, plus all the municipalities. So yeah, it's a bang your head against the wall argument that's not going to go anywhere.
I mean, it also is part of the overall cost to produce a loan, the overall cost to service a loan, right?
Especially from a documentary perspective,
yeah,
right?
It would be a fascinating study, and I'm not volunteering for this, would be to really look at like a single state originator / servicer and like truly look at their cost to produce versus a multi-state national. And you got to level it off for scale and all that stuff, but it would be an interesting
services are in an amazing position. I know I've stated this before. I'll say it again. For originators out there, first-time homebuyer hunting or new client hunting, customer acquisition cost, CAC is about $500 a loan. For servicers, it's $100. So servicers have a very cheaper, more inexpensive way to get the next loan. And so we've talked on this show about the battle between originators and servicers. It's what it is. It's just easier to take someone who's already under your umbrella. And some of these servicers are really good. The retention rate is, 85 to 92%. It's a battle that rages on. And so, if you see that play out and fully baked in, I mean, originators just become in the future first-time homebuyer hunters based on relationships in the street at the local level to find that first-time homebuyer. And it's much, much harder to acquire a refinance. Not saying it doesn't happen and it can't be done, because there are plenty of good, lenders that arm originators with the ability to compete with servicers, but it certainly gets tougher.
Hey, Courtney, I'd love you to weigh in on this from a servicing perspective, but when we talk about, retention, recapture, and we've heard, the benchmark, the top players north of 80%, right? Some I've seen a 90% quoted out there. 85 maybe is more realistic. Do you think those stats are true retention, or is it I had 100, runoff was X, and I replenished X plus, therefore I'm at 85 or 90, post boom, refinance boom or whatever?
I think it's the latter. And I think that a couple of things in this space, a few unpopular opinions to toss into it as well. I don't know that they're unpopular. I just don't know that people think about these things as much as I do, which, yes, is my own problem. Somebody offered me therapy for my desire to continue to talk about servicing yesterday. So thank you to that person who did that. I would say that recapture retention is actually a thing that exists when you complete a life cycle and somebody actually takes ownership of it. The people that are best at recapture retention are actually the people that are best at what you loan officer folks call DTC, right? If you leave a servicing shop, pure servicing people, I got your back on this one, up to recap and retain. Can we say that? Recap and retain loans along the way. That's where you see that, right? Okay, so let's take the two best by the math, even if it's false math, recapture reservicer folks in the industry, Rocket and Cooper, right? And now they're best friends. The reason I believe from a technology and operations perspective, they're best at that is that they have strong DTC capabilities outside of that. And they individually, as brands, invested in their own technology environment from a to the consumer perspective. Neither of these entities relied upon what the servicing industry or really the mortgage industry offered them from a technology perspective. You could argue that both were inspired by early CFPB management in the space, right? Both of them had like Kraninger era CFPBs all up in their business about how they communicated with consumers, but both made substantial tech investments at about the same time. This is pre-COVID, right? In this, how am I going to regularly communicate with this consumer, because mortgage technology has not solved that problem yet. And I will rally with any mortgage technologist if you believe you've solved this problem and you've solved this problem well, because we haven't seen it, certainly not with ICE, certainly not with Sagent, certainly not with, I can keep going, Encompass. You guys can name all the LOSs on here too. They're so good. Here's an opportunity though for everybody that's listening. These two people that are arguably best in industry at this are now in the same company, and they got to pick one, right? And they'll probably pick the best out of all of their strategies, but it leaves a huge open opportunity for the rest of us to really think about that. There's two gaps here. One, what is the gap between your servicing and your origination? And did subservicing make that even further away, right? If you subservice your loans, is that even further away from your lending channel? The answer is yes, right? And are there other solutions where I can continue to bring these togethers? I'm like full Michigan today, guys. We can bring them togethers, and you can maybe fill those gaps in. The word that was used yesterday a lot was flywheel, so I'll just use it now. Between loan origination, secondary cap markets, direct to consumer engagement, which happens between origination and servicing, and between servicing and origination if you want to make a new loan.
No, you're not wrong, Courtney. You are not wrong. And I think that when you think about the customer, in our case, the member, they're not a chess piece that you just get to move around and decide. They decide. Like, they're the one that chooses to be recaptured or retained because you have offered them something of value. And you directly pointed to that and said, hey, maybe we didn't have the best mousetrap, and Rocket and Cooper built a mousetrap to try to provide that value so that the end borrower chose to continue to do services with them. And sometimes I think we get lost in those numbers, and we get lost in the averages, and we forget that that's what we're trying to solve. Are we providing enough value so that they choose to stick with us?
I'll just throw out there, I think freedom is the very best, but freedom at retention. But and they have, like you said, Courtney, to your point, they use different systems that a lot of originators use. And
there's also a huge investment at freedom in that consumer space. So I'm not belittling freedom in my comments. You're absolutely right.
Oh no, I didn't say you are. I just want to give them some love. And what I'll say is, it's a fair trade. A year ago, the trade is, if you say, I'm going to sell a loan to freedom, and the thought is, I'm going to kiss that borrower goodbye forever because they're going to retain it, recapture and retain, they pay a fair price up front. And so last year, they literally were blowing through, larger lenders, like, for example, PennyMac, by 100 basis points. And so for us, it's like, okay, I've got this $550 manual government Ginnie Mae deal that they want to buy. They're providing a wider credit box to help get the loan to begin with, where we take all the risk if there's ever a default. Then we sell it to them and they handle it from there. They may make us repurchase it, but I got to tell you, they're really good at, just working through whatever goes on with their borrowers. And so, it's a trade-off as an originator. We also service, but we're not a servicer first. To play that game, you really have to lay out a lot of cash, and some people take out sub-debt. Most servicers, if you look, I follow Ivy Zellman and their team. They're now owned by Walker and Dunlap. You can see who's taken out $500 million in debt of notes come due in 2030 at 5.5% rates, turn around and go buy that loan from an originator and then hold on to that asset for life and use their systems. And a lot of times the value, I hate to commoditize what we do, but on a refinance, a lot of times the value is simply, is my payment lower? If I'm an existing servicing client, what is my value, if you get an email sent to you and it's a one pager, click here to save $150 a month, click done. I mean, that's the value for a lot of people that, are refinancing. So, I mean, literally the whole point of the refinance is to take an existing client and just make their payment better. And so that's the highest value that they're receiving. And so who's really, really good at that? So it is, I'm not saying it's a dead end, for originators that want to try and recapture, because we do. But some servicers are just better at it than others. And so hopefully that puts a bow on this 21-minute segment.
It won't, because I do want to go this again. Somebody's got to take this project on. It's not going to be me. Maybe Courtney.
It does sound like a Courtney project, doesn't it?
So KP, what I heard, single page, click here, lower payment, right? That's one tranche of mortgage transactions. Call it the streamlined rate and term, very simple, right? That'll fly through every process, pretty much everywhere.
Which is currently about 15 to 18% of the market.
Right.
So it's still mostly purchase right now.
So what I want to really see from a retention recapture perspective is by tranche, purchase by product, purchase by conventional, purchase by FHA, purchase by VA, then refinance, streamline by product, conventional FHA, VA, rate, debt consolidation, cash out. The more, the more challenged refi transactions, there's no way those are running at the same or similar retention as the streamline, right? And so Ben, a PRMG guy, commented, I'll put him up here.
This is a good comment.
Talked about Rocket, right? Speed and use, but are not really good about creating personal connection. And I would counter that by saying, in the example that KP put up, which is that streamline, I'm just trying to solve for one thing, lower payment. What do you need? What personal connection is needed there? There isn't any. It is the other transactions that do tend to need some love and need some extra care.
And Ben brings up a good point. If that servicer on their first offer doesn't put their best foot forward, and it can be beat in price, almost every time, the borrower's like, hey, Ben, I did my loan with you, and my servicer that you sold that loan to is offering me X. And Ben's like, oh, I got that. And so then you break the trust of the servicer if they don't put their best foot forward the first time.
As long as Ben has done enough in the time between origination and that inquiry to be relevant and remembered, right?
And Ben does. Ben's very good.
Ben does, but does everybody? Because what we know is that when you look at consumer surveys, the average consumer can't remember their loan officer's name 6 months after the transaction. They can't remember the company name a year later,
which is crazy.
And so, right, your biggest transaction of your life, but we have so many things bombarding us that staying top of mind, the servicer gets to do that because you're paying your payment to them. And I would argue that even if you are the servicer, I know who mine is. This is because this is what I do. However, I pay mine by automatic draft. I don't have to write a check. I don't even have to go in and click any buttons inside my app. It just happens every single month. So there's no connection being built. I'd have to go look up who my provider was because it's all automatic. What I'd really be interested in, and I'm sure nobody is tracking this, but what happens when that borrower pays off and they don't buy immediately? They go rent for a while, or they're because they're moving and they're making all these life changes. So how good are we at recapturing that? Because that's going to tell you the value of the relationship. Or does that go into this now, what KP has been talking about is this first-time homebuyer pool? And then if you decide that your model is going to be this hunter and you're going to go after these first-time homebuyers or people that don't currently own a home for whatever reason, how do you find the people who paid off and moved somewhere? And now you can get them into your funnel. Like, how do you think about it from a model standpoint? Like, this is my challenge to the folks in the audience. Are you thinking about the places where somebody is not the best? So maybe you're not going to get that rate and term refi. Freedom's going to get it, or Cooper or Rocket. Where can you pull business up?
We have a special guest joining our commentary. It is the one and only Rob Chrisman from the Chrisman Commentary.
And I got to say loud and clear, Rob, that my captain, Chris George, would agree with you. Absolutely. And I think that if you think about AI and all of its benefits and all of this stuff, right? The AI in the world, what it does it not do, right? It removes the heart from things. It removes the human connectivity from things. And at the end of the day, Christy, what you're talking about is the same thing. If your loan officer had a big old heart like KP, would you remember him? I would.
Absolutely.
Right. And so no one's probably ever accused you of having a big old heart, KP. But I mean, I'd remember Brian Vieaux. I'd remember Christy Souk. I would. Right. And I think that, that type of service is what, Brian, I'm stealing all of this from Brian's LinkedIn post right now, but I mean, it's this concept of being a loan advisor. It's being the person that you call when you're going to get a divorce. It's the person where you know that you can't make your payments in the future, that you can actually call that person because you trusted them to help set up a large financial transaction for you, one that scared you, right? And even a computer can't do that. But I like the use case, KP, of my servicer's telling me I can reduce my payment by $150 and bringing it to Ben and saying, hey, Ben, is that true?
Well, I would just add, I mean, I've even talked to, some of our first-time homebuyer hunters. There's one branch manager that comes to mind in Cincinnati. He's like, man, I don't even look at refis. He's like, I don't care. And, it's a huge opportunity that he's missing, but he's like, I don't even focus on it, So another way, obviously, for originators is to use some technology tools, CRM, triggers, alerts, all that kind of thing, to continue to have conversation. I mean, everyone knows Rob because he's the most well-traveled man in the business. He's on the road and he's done it for decades. And, people are going to go back to him because he's top of mind. And originators, have that opportunity, and they can be the first mover in offering a refinance. Hey, I see that you're eligible for refinance, and maybe get out in front of a consumer, for a refinance opportunity before the servicer in a more personalized way. But I'll just say that right now, at best, I've seen 18% refis in the market. So this isn't exactly the best quarter or year to be talking about refis because it's just not really out there. So even though there's probably about 2 million borrowers, that the second we get to 6.25 or even high fives, they're in the money. And so, it's just something to think about, refinances. But when rates get low, there's a lot more first-time home buyers that have affordability. So all rates are the driver, and all ships, rise with that tide.
The feedback from the audience is what really makes these conversations interesting, because this is like the exact opposite of Rob's comment, right? And so I would add another element to it and say, if the first time,
shame on that loan officer, Kara.
No, look, so this was going to be my point. I'm going to hold my finger and be like, okay, I want to go next. So I'm raising my hand. Yeah. So you finish your comment, Brian. Then I want to comment on what Kara is saying. Kara, I'm not sure how she says her name.
So I don't even know where I was going, but I'll try to get back on track. Something that I see loan officers do way too much is send their link. Here's my link to my application. And maybe that's where Kara started. Maybe Kara got the link. Kara was introduced to a loan officer by a realtor. That may have been the very first time Kara even knew this loan officer existed. She got the link, she clicked the link, applied, and then the processor, doing a great job, stepped in as part of the team and carried it through to closing. And so there's no way Kara's ever going to recall, the loan officer that she worked with, because she clicked a link and then was served by the team. That's where I was going to go with it, Christy. I think
I was following right along with you. Like, this is what everybody here is talking about is building that relationship. And that is the differentiator of the local lender. And if you are not taking the time to build that relationship, I go back to realtors and the relationships that they used to build. They had those books. For those of you who are new to the business, you don't know about these MLS books. Before the internet, realtors had their MLS books that came out once a week, and that's how you knew what properties were listed. And if you drove around and you looked at a neighborhood, you had to call either your agent or the agent on the sign, and you developed a relationship with your agent because you called them to get information. And there was no pressure because they knew you couldn't go anywhere else to get that information. So you built this trust over a period of time, and it was through conversation, and that allowed for exploration. And when, back in the dark ages, when we typed things in triplicate on carbon paper, we met with borrowers face to face. And yes, I still have borrowers today, to Courtney's point. I haven't personally made a loan in many years. I still love to do it, and I wish I could get in there and do it, but I don't. I'm not really allowed to today. Time constraints, all the other things. I'd be a terrible originator. But I still have borrowers who call me because we built a relationship, but it was built over questions and time. And no, I didn't send them a link. We didn't have that. We had real communication. And so you have to think about what your process is. Maybe your model is to be the most efficient, and you're going to continuously hunt because that's what you're good at. But if you think people are going to come back to you because you were the originator, Cara, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, because you made such a valid point, you're not going to win in that model.
That borrower would be like, who was that? This one's for Courtney. Who was that girl I talked to back in the day? Oh, no, it's that lady, Christy. Yes, she's on that podcast I see every Friday. I'm going to give her a call.
By the way, I try to follow. Courtney's like a coach to me. So I listen, I learn, I use what I learn, and I put it in practice, and it's still backfired, and I still got people shooting me. So, well, guys, this was I love these conversations. Right, these are the real talks on the last word. Not to
did the earth just spin like super fast? That was the fastest show we've ever had.
It was.
I let you in late. Sorry about that, KP.
I was listening.
Guys, any closing thoughts before we shut her down for the weekend? Courtney, you go first. You get the last word. The first last word.
No, great conversation. I think that we should continue to talk about this. What's local, what's national, and where those things collide. I think that there's a lot there.
KP.
We're broke. We're broke as a nation.
We almost made it. We almost made it.
Did you see we shut down 132 State Department offices. We are shutting down expenses. We are so broke. They don't want to admit it. I don't understand the pride coming out of the DC, but I love the fact that they're acting like we're broke because we are at 122 DTI.
Christy.
Got to get my where's the 10-year? We're at 4.275. So we're strong going into the weekend. Go out there and make some sales calls.
Yeah, man, a lot of open houses. Hit the open houses tomorrow, yep. Loan officers. Get out there, be seen, be vocal, be visible, be seen in your communities. Guys, have a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. Come back next Friday. I'll have the right link next week, KP. All right.